button to use it like that.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I will call upon the clerk who will advise how the meeting will be run this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. We are trialling hybrid meetings with registered speakers and councillors who are not members of the committee having the option to join the meeting via Zoom, and also live streaming the meeting via the council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The meetings are also recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphone when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees present refrain from watching the live stream or joining the Zoom link, as this will cause interference. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chairman. I have confirmed those entitled to speak before the start of the meeting. We're not expecting a fire alarm test today. In the event of evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. Please can you also ensure your mobile phones and iPads are switched to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application. At the end of the presentation, the officer will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any registered speakers on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once the questions from the committee have concluded, the Chairman will open up the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chairman will seek a proposer and a seconder for the application. The proposal must be made in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. The Chairman will then confirm with the Planning Officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting during consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting over to the Chairman, Councillor Pentney. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you update us on the changed composition of the committee this evening, please?
Yes, Chairman. We have Councillor Long here instead of Councillor Dart. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, firstly, we need to consider the minutes to confirm as correct record the minutes of this meeting held on the 12th of December 2022. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Barbara Lewis, a seconder. Councillor Hill, all those in favour, please raise your hands. So those minutes are carried. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. No. Officers, likewise, any pecuniary, non-pecuniary interest? Nope. Okay. I'm not aware of any urgent items from either the senior officers or governance. We'll move to the applications to consider this evening. Please note I have changed the order of the agenda, and so as such we'll be considering item 6 first, which is the application for land north of Totnes Road, Carlton St Mary, Paynton, reference P2022-0888. The clerk has confirmed that those speaking on this item are indeed in the room, so I will ask Mr Jones to please introduce the application.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for reserved matters relating to planning permission P/2019/0281, which was an outline permission for up to 100 dwellings approved with a detailed access. So the reserved matters relate to the layout, the scale, the appearance and landscaping. The access was approved as a single point of vehicle access down in this area off the Totnes Road between numbers 352 and 338 Totnes Road. Firstly, I'd like to update members on a late representation and an updated consultee response. This late representation is from an occupier of property off Totnes Road, and it covers drainage concerns. And it relates to comments received last week and an update earlier today. Basically, as per the slide, the concerns are that the drainage interferes with a legal right-of-way, which has been registered with the Land Registry. The issue has not been properly addressed, and update information has also not been made available. Just to note, it was on the public website last week, and it also suggests that the current information hasn't addressed previous concerns. The more recent comment, dated the 16th to the 1st below, as you'll see, the final sentence there talks about the concerns in terms of flood risk have not been demonstrated, or that David Stewart, the council's drainage engineer, has not specifically stated that there's now no risk of any properties on the Totnes Road from flooding. So this is a copy of the updated consultee comments from the council's drainage engineer, following the receipt of some further technical information in support of the drainage detail previously submitted. The engineer has reviewed the recent detail, and on point 10, just refer to you that although there are a number of discrepancies between the drawings and the hydronic model, it would appear that the surface water drainage system has been designed in order that no properties on the development are at risk of flooding for the critical 1 in a 100-year storm event plus 50% for climate change. And he said that this can be confirmed once the above points have been addressed. So these comments were received today and have been requested to go onto the website, public website today, and they have been issued to the applicant. There has been a response with further information to address these points 1 to 9, and this matter is now with the council's drainage engineer, and also confirmation that his final point is to do with development, that no risk of development for properties within the development or land or buildings adjacent. So just moving on, in terms of the proposal before you, that's a slide briefly showing the context of the site on the outskirts of Paignton as it transitions to the rural open countryside, and the reserve matters relating to a field system on the hill slopes opposite around the area of Ocean BMW and the Parker's Arms. So this is a closer slide, so you'll see that this is the area where the approved access point is. Residential properties to the east of Borough Park Road, where there's a turning circle at the end. There's a degree of brownfield land within the site here, and the residential properties off the Totnes Road on the bottom. To the west, we have the parish church, which is Grade 2 star listed, and associated buildings, and also the school, which are around the junction with Blagden Road. So this is a site photo taken from the field gate access from the previously developed pocket of land that I just highlighted, looking west. So in the far distance, this is the tree-lined border with the church and associated buildings. And down here, this is the rear of the properties off the Totnes Road, and also the silver roof property there is Ocean BMW, part of the building. This is again looking west, but slightly further up the hillside. So the development will run to approximately around this sort of middle point, and the hedge on the right-hand side up here is part of the development to be retained. And this is looking eastwards towards Borough Park Road. You see the rooftops here.
Consultation desk. That's arboriculture section. Consultation.
The rooftop of Borough Park Road here, and a hedge boundary of the site. So just in terms of some context, this is an indicative plan that was submitted with the outline application. Just in terms of context, it's expected that development will run roughly in line with the rear plot boundaries of Borough Park Road, along the contour of the hillside, reducing slightly as you get towards the church. That the upper field section here would be public open space, which would be enhanced with landscaping and ecological mitigation. And there'll be some communal facilities in terms of an equipped area of play, some allotments, and orchards. Down here was expected to be part of the drainage infrastructure, marked as a gap in the development and with the blue star. There was also some pedestrian connectivity expected here, near the junction with Totnes Road and Blagdon Road. And also a desire there to link to Borough Park Road to the east. So this is indicative plan with the approved access. And just for some context, this is what was approved at outline stage and is fixed. Basically, we've got a simple junction in with a moved crossing facility here, and some enhanced signage and road coverings. And this is the area of the proposed access. So this is the proposed layout that is before members. So the layout here broadly accords generally with the outline plans. The extent of development again loosely spreads across the hillside in line with the rear of the plot boundaries with Borough Park Road. Public open space is again here to the north, including a new linear field hedge boundary as part of some replacement green infrastructure. Drainage infrastructure is also again expected to the southern boundary here, which will show some slides in detail in due course, and community facilities in terms of an equipped area of play, some allotments here and some parking for the allotments, and some orchards. There's also a pedestrian link to the edge of the site to connect to Blagdon Road and in and around the area of the school and church, and also to the edge of the site here with the ambitions to provide a sustainable link to Borough Park Road for pedestrians and cyclists. So this is a slightly close-up view of the proposal. It's substantially a scheme of detached dwellings with 68 out of the 100 units being as such. The remainder are provided within a number of short terraces. Here centrally within this development, and also here. There's also 4 semi-detached dwellings and 8 apartments, and the apartment block is here nestled in the eastern corner of the site. So this is the proposed accommodation plan for the development, colour-coded for the different size properties. We have 1-bed units yellow up to 5-bed units in orange. You see predominantly the development is a mixture of 3 and 4 beds, which are the green and the purple. So the scheme will deliver 30% affordable housing, which was established at outline stage through the legal agreement. So 30 of the 100 units will be affordable through a mixture of social rent, affordable rent, and shared ownership. And there'll be 10 units of each. These are provided within 3 areas. So we've got a pocket here off the southern road, which is in 2 short terraces. The middle road, which is on slightly higher ground. We've got some further units. Then there's a third pocket in the southeastern corner here, which is a mixture of short terraces, a pair of semi-detached, and some apartments. So this is the proposed parking plan. So all dwellings have at least 2 driveways, and most have an additional garage space. These are largely on plot, but some are on street and allocated. In terms of this central area, as detailed within the committee report, there are 6 visitor spaces here and 2 visitor spaces within the parking court. It's been identified that 4 of the dwellings within this part of the development are only assigned one space, and it's proposed that there's capacity within these visitor spaces to provide 2 spaces assigned for each unit in order to comply with the policy expectation. So this is the proposed drainage plan for the development. It's a system of controlled discharge to the public sewer off the site on the Totnes Road. And due to the site constraints, it's a controlled discharge at greenfield rate provided through a series of storage tanks through this central area. A shallow attenuation basin here near the southern border, and some more storage tanks before you connect to the public sewer. So just in terms of some closer detail on the southern border element of this drainage plan, as there are some drainage concerns in this area. So the drainage system has been designed to accord with the expectation of the 1 in 100 year storm event plus climate change, but the scheme also accounts for 10% in terms of urban creep. The basin's main role here is to provide water treatment rather than water storage as a settlement sort of filtration feature. It's only expected to be used through the maximum storm events of the 1 in 100 year event plus climate change. So this is just a picture of where the storage basin is. So this is number 366 here, Totnes Road, and the open, shallow attenuation basin is here. Then we have the storage tanks drifting through towards where the access point is. So just moving on in terms of some design considerations. Through the course of the application, the applicant has proposed a character area concept with 4 character areas with the dwellings within them treated slightly differently to try and add some rural context to the development form being proposed. So the blue is a villager character zone, the pink is a village 2 character zone, and then the green is a rural character zone, and then a farmstead character zone as proposed. So in terms of materials, the dwellings will be largely a mixture of rough cast render or a red brick, and there is a variety in terms of the slight texture and colour of the red bricks being proposed. The current roof material is 3 types of concrete roofs being suggested. And as per the recommendation, there is a proposal that further thought should be given to this material in order to provide something more contextually appropriate for the rural context. Boundaries have been enhanced through the period of the application to secure more hedge borders through the scheme, at the edge of the scheme up here, and also to secure more tree planting through the central element of the scheme to try and address concerns on the extent of development and the overriding character being proposed. So this is the landscaping proposals. Sort of shows there is a sort of central green section running north to south here, and the majority of the landscaping is around the periphery. As I said, there has been discussions that have been provided more tree planting through the central spine and within the rear gardens to try and soften up the development. So on the western element, there is obviously the communal facilities touched on earlier. So there's an equipped area of play, as expected through the outline, which will be close to the border of the church here. And the northern section will have public access as an informal open space area with enhanced planting, ecological features like reptile areas, receptor areas, and a new linear replacement field hedge border for the existing one that is to be removed as part of the development. And along the southern border, so there's been an additional area of green space. The outline proposal suggested a back-to-back relationship with the existing properties off Totnes Road. However, the proposal that has come in has provided some extra breathing space by presenting a road along the southern border and has presented a green trim trail, which is like a sort of a green play walking feature, which will be on the natural route potentially for people accessing the school and church. So just moving on to the character of the proposals dwellings being proposed. As mentioned, there's a mixture of rough render and red brick and differing roof materials. Within the differing character areas, there's different suggested treatment of feature gables in terms of using a secondary material, such as tile hanging or timber cladding, as opposed to a full render version. There are also differing treatments of window surrounds and bay detailing, etc., to provide some variety. Here are some further examples of the dwelling types proposed. As you see, there are some small gable features which are reflect some of the local character properties within the area. And again, some properties having chimneys, etc., to provide some enlightenment of the roofscape. So this is a montage that sort of suggests how some of the similar dwelling types will be treated differently within different areas in terms of singular elevation materials or using a secondary, say tile hanging or timber treatment. That's here. And different treatments, as I said, in terms of window surrounds and bay details. So all of the properties are two-storey, except the apartment block, which is a three-storey building with two-storey wings. And again, there's some tile hanging to break up the massing. This again, finished in rough cast render to try and reflect the rural context. So I've just got some street scenes for you to try and understand the development more. So this is a street view of the southern street, looking northwards up towards, up the hill. So we've got a mixture of some dark materials that will help reduce the starkness of the development and a mixture of materials through the development. This is the street scene that addresses the public open space to the north. So you're looking down towards these properties. And this is again within the upper areas of the site. This is the northeastern area of the site close to Borough Park Road. And it's got some further street scenes here. You've obviously got the apartment block with the short terraces that sit nearby. Again, these rough cast render. And a street scene adjacent to the the equipped play area close to the western boundaries of the site. So there's been a submitted phasing plan as expected through the outline consent. So there is a suggestion that there'll be an early phase of the entrance development, and then the bulk of the development will be delivered in phase 2, which will be this section, but that will encompass then delivering on the community facilities, public open space, and link to Blagdon Road, Totnes Road junction. So the key issues have been outlined within the committee report for members, just highlighting in bold some of the sort of matters that have had a fair degree of discussion through the course of the application. As mentioned, there's been some protracted discussions on the design and visual impact, that's both of the dwellings and the landscaping, including the boundary treatments, etc. And there's been substantial sort of enhancement in terms of trees and border treatments through the scheme, utilising, let's say, additional use of stone for some boundaries, removing timber for some of the more prominent side and rear boundaries for more robust material options, and softening the development generally in terms of trying to respond to the rural context. In terms of flood risk, there's been a few iterations of the development proposals. Obviously, the basic parameters of the scheme remain unchanged in terms of the form of the flood risk system, the flood surface water system, in terms of attenuation tanks, where they are located, and their general parameters. As mentioned, there's been some additional information fed through a series of rounds of discussions, and we currently have the proposals that are largely happy with the drainage engineer's comments earlier today. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the resolution of outstanding highway questions to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. Those points are largely matters around road adoption and are not part really of the current proposals for the reserved matters. Also, the resolution of surface water drainage design that would not increase the risk of flooding in consultation with the Council's drainage engineer, delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. Just to confirm, so that would be confirmation from the Council's drainage engineer that he is content that the detailed design would not increase the risk of flooding for houses development within the site or on land or buildings adjacent. And the conditions as outlined with final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and also the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. And that's just finally a proposed layout in the context of the existing street pattern in the area. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Members, we now move to public speakers. Firstly, I shall call upon, apologies, first I'll call on Mr. Graham White to address the meeting against the application. Please come forward, Mr. White. Welcome. You'll have a total of 5 minutes to address the committee, and I'll prompt you when you have 1 minute remaining of those 5 minutes, but make a start when you're ready to do so, please.
Great. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name's Graham White, and I live at number 366 Totnes Road. I have a right-of-way that has been registered with HM Land Registry to access the rear of my property via the access lane. I have instructed the solicitor to protect my right-of-way, and I have no intention of allowing it to be obstructed. I am speaking to you now to draw this to your attention because this is not in the public interest for members to allow a development which cannot be implemented due to legal reasons. Torquay Council have previously refused developments for various reasons, and I have already given your officers the reference numbers to these recent examples. I appreciate that Torquay needs housing, but allowing developments that cannot proceed won't deliver housing. It will just land local residents like me with large legal bills, and that's not fair. So I ask, if you're proposing to permit this development, you do so on the condition that the developer provides a revised drawing that amend the proposed scheme by moving the attenuation pond, which is located behind me, 10 metres north to allow for my easement from the left side of my property to the right-hand side of the access lane. It should be noted that Yalberton watercourse between Totnes Road and the discharge location at the River Dart Stoke Gable became the Rain River on the 1st of April 2006. This is the proposed location for the discharge of the water runoff from the site. The Environment Agency are unaware of this development, discharging into their river. Historically, flooding has occurred from the watercourse upstream of the storage pond at Totnes Road behind the BMW garage. In addition, on a number of occasions when the storage pond has been exceeded, the flood into the roads and properties downstream have been reported. I am concerned that when this happens, the proposal site will not be able to discharge safely and flooding will incur behind my property. I have spoken with local residents and taken pictures of the flooding from only this weekend. The new proposal is looking to add an additional 558 litres of water every minute to an already overflowing river. And Mary Curra of Brook Farm Forge stated, "I hope when it floods I can seek compensation." Collinson St Mary's Stall stated, "It is a shame that the playfield is flooded again and we are concerned that additional developments are being proposed." Councillor John Thomas of Brook Farm, Long Road, stated, "He is very concerned of the flood into his garden and he's been trying to fight this for the last 16 years. Dr Michael Rhodes of Forge Cottage, Stoke Gable, stated, "The last time a large development was added, the Environment Agency was involved in upgrading the river, but instead over the years it still overflows." Peter Riley of Byton Mill stated, "If I do not manage the watercourse over my land, my whole garden floods, and I am very concerned the Environment Agency are not involved in this development. I am asking for a condition that the Environment Agency are involved and a full risk assessment is completed in line with Torquay Council's own strategic flood risk assessment of 2008. In addition, my house draws water from a well in my garden that is fed from a water that runs off from the proposed development. My children drink from this well, and as it supplies the water to my house, and therefore I am very concerned in maintaining the existing good water quality and quantity. I appreciate there is a detailed drainage scheme before you. However, I am concerned that this very unusual detailed scheme might not be implemented correctly. I am also concerned that it might not be maintained correctly over the lifetime of the development, which could contaminate my water supply to my house. For example, in years to come, households might find and use their permitted development rights and alter and install small extensions which would not need planning permission.
You have 1 minute remaining.
This could also use traditional soakaways which would impede on my water extraction. I'm asking you for a condition to ensure that an independent drainage engineer certifies that the drainage has been installed in accordance with the approved plans prior to occupation. Drainage continues to operate as it's designed. I'm also asking for a condition that the Environment Agency are involved to check that the water quantity and quality of my water remains intact. I am also asking for a condition to withdraw the permitted development rights to ensure that future alterations will need to come before planning of this department, so to ensure safe drainage arrangements can be guaranteed. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr White. I now call upon Councillor David Thomas to address the committee.
No problem at all. I was surprised that it was my turn. Thank you very much indeed, Mr Chairman.
As you know, Councillor David Thomas, you have 5 minutes. I'll prompt you when you've got 1 minute remaining, but make a start when you're ready to do so, please.
Thank you very much. I'm here this evening not to talk for or against this application, but to ensure the following points have due consideration and are fully understood before the Planning Committee make a final decision. The two issues I want to highlight are the impact on riparian rights to groundwater and flood alleviation. The first issue, I've got to confess, I didn't know a lot about it until I did some research. I believe that it's not come up before as a planning context issue, but I understand from your planning report that it is indeed a material consideration. So what am I talking about? Hopefully you've got a better idea than I have and you'll be able to guide my thought process. But firstly, any landowner or developer whose property adjoins or contains a natural watercourse should be aware of the system of rights and obligations along the course of this watercourse. And the borehole that Graham White was talking about actually comes with 3 rights: a right of use, a right of flow, and more importantly, a right of purity. The water passing through should be unpolluted. And it is this right of purity that I believe the Planning Committee this evening must take on board. I think you need to ask yourself, what assurances have you been given that the water passing through the site will remain unpolluted? Now, I can see nothing within the document this far. I don't even think it's been mentioned, but I think I'll just leave that there for a second. I do want to move on to my second point, and that's flood alleviation. For me, this is the biggest concern with this application, and according to your own report, the drainage officer still has concerns over the plans submitted. Now, I appreciate that there was a screenshot that came up just before the start of this meeting, or at the part of the meeting. I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is not the first time he's had these concerns, and it does seem to be taking an inordinate amount of time for the developer to resolve this situation. I've got massive concerns with the planning committee simply delegating this to officers tonight. If that happens, there's no oversight. How members gain assurance that these proposals are working correctly? I've no idea. I believe many of the problems of the current Brixham Road and the highways are down to early delegation of the issues instead of keeping items in the public domain, having a discussion, taking our residents on the journey, rather than simply a couple of weeks before something major is about to happen. These flood alleviation tanks still cause some concern regarding the placing and the height of them in relationship to the landscape. They may be designed to handle so much water per minute, but what happens when the water meadow at the bottom of Collerton is flooded? The flood water in the tank literally has nowhere to go. So we saw a perfect example of that only this weekend at Clenham Valley, when the watercourse that goes out there through to the sea. And this works most of the time. But once you've got a high tide and the tide is in, there's nowhere for the water to go. It just backs up and the road is flooded. Now carry that example back to Collerton. There's no sea, but there's a water meadow that does become saturated, and then where does that water go? It'll not just be the road that is flooded, but once again, it'll be the homes in Saxon Meadow. They've already previously suffered from flooding and raw sewage being pushed back into their homes. So whatever flood alleviation and attenuation system you actually come up with, the committee must have confidence that it will work. Very quickly, the screenshot that was shown at the beginning of this meeting, I did capture it, and it said, the drainage engineer states, it would appear that the surface water drainage system... Thank you. It would appear that the surface water drainage system has been designed in order that no properties on the development are at risk of flooding, full stop. Therefore, I think if I was on the committee, the very first question I'd want to be is, what about the current properties that are already built below the development site? What about the flooding of those properties that are built and occupied? What risk still exists for those properties? Because this evening, there was no mention of it on that screenshot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David Thomas. I now call upon Mr. Andrew Rowe to address the meeting in support of the application. Welcome, Mr. Rowe. You'll have a total of 5 minutes to address the committee. I'll prompt you when you have 1 minute remaining, but make a start when you're ready to do so, please.
Is that working? Yep. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, and thank you, Officer, for a presentation. I'm Andrew Rowe. I'm representing Cavanagh Homes here tonight. To start with, in terms of the access rights or alleged access rights, just to be clear that Cavanagh Homes do own the whole application site as the red line. They've got title absolutes on that, and there is no reference to any rights over the land they own, either on their title or on the title of the adjacent property, which was purchased in 2017. The applicant has sought to engage with the property owner, however, and specifically requested for evidence of any such rights, but no evidence has been provided to date. Cavanagh made a formal submission back in November last year setting out their legal advice, and the legal advice from Ashford solicitors is that no such rights exist. Effectively, you can't have a right, can't gain a right to park. It's different from if you enclose a space for a certain period of time and no one interrupts that space, you can gain rights, but it's not the situation here. So, so in summary, there's no reference to any easements on any legal documents. That's been requested. No evidence has come forward. Cavanagh's position is that that their conclusions none exist. But notwithstanding that, it is a private legal matter. It falls outside the scope of planning and therefore doesn't fall for members to consider. Moving on, just if I sort of so slightly off piece a second on the drainage side of things, and councillor, a member over here made a number of comments. Just so you understand, the way the drainage is designed in this scheme is the existing greenfield runoff rate, so as it is today, plus a 50% additional allowance for climate change, plus another 10% for urban creep. And urban creep, I don't know if you know it, basically it means over time people build extensions and things like that, so there may be less ability to seek into the ground. The scheme has been designed as a sealed system, so there is no leakage from it. The basin itself is also designed sealed, so there can be no leakage from that system. So that is the premises, that actually it's a much better situation than existing. And in a situation where there's heavy rain, it can hold that, the whole design, so it can hold that water, so it doesn't result in any flooding downstream. That's the whole premise of it. So it's the existing runoff rate at a 1 in 100-year storm, plus 50% more capacity, plus another 10% capacity. So it's very much designed to future-proof it and ensure there is no flooding or no risk to properties on the scheme or adjacent. So that is specifically how it's been designed. That hasn't really altered. There is some recent information on the details of that flooding scheme, which has been talked about, but the basis has not changed. So anyway, so housing crisis. Torquay have declared a housing crisis. This scheme will meet that housing crisis head-on. It's in a it's in a sustainable, well-connected area. It's identified for growth in the local plan, in the master plan, in the neighbourhood plan, as you all know. It already benefits from an outline planning permission, and the reserve matters before you this evening is fully policy compliant. So what are the key benefits of this scheme? The key benefit is that it will address that housing crisis head-on. Torquay's council housing register has increased by 50% since 2018, with over 1,600 families currently in need of affordable home. Again, I'm sure members are very aware of this. And in addition, 150 families are currently in temporary accommodation. Not all households would be on that register, as they don't think they'll have an opportunity to be housed. That, together with recent increase in prices, lack of availability, mean the figure is actually likely to be significantly higher than that. This scheme... Yeah, 1 minute remaining. This scheme will result in 30% affordable housing. That's 30 additional houses, which will be energy efficient. That mix is dictated by the housing need assessment, so there'll be 8 more 1-beds, 7 more 2-beds, 11 more 3-beds, 4 more 4-bed houses, with 2/3 being rented, and that will go to existing residents. So that is a key benefit of this scheme. As you've heard, and we've worked with your officers to enhance this scheme, which has been productive. 50 more trees have gone in, as well as hedges, walls, estates, railings, character areas to create a strong sense of place. Public play, trim trails, allotments, orchards, open space, habitat. This really is a great scheme that has benefited from the input of officers as well as the input from neighbours. So, who will deliver these? Cavanagh will deliver these quickly to meet your housing crisis or the housing crisis head-on. They're a Torquay firm, which I'm sure you're well aware of. They're committed to early delivery. They're already working on the technical details, and subject to this being approved today... Thank you, Mr. Rowe. That is your 5 minutes concluded. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Cheers. Members, before we move to questions, we have had a couple of mobile phone interruptions this evening already, so if you haven't yet switched off your phone to silent or your iPad, please do so now. We don't want any further interruptions. Members, we now move to questions for the case officer. So, members, any questions, please? Councillor Jackie Thomas. I'm sorry, Councillor Hill, could you just switch off that mic there? I'll just sit on. Sorry, Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you. Remember to switch it on this time. Thank you, Chair. Just listening to some of the speakers this evening, one of the issues was something called repairing rights, which is obviously the purity of water. Can the officer please talk me through this and the effects and how much weight we can apply to this issue with this application?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've not come across riparian rights before. It's quite an obscure one. So I took some legal advice, and the advice was, as reported within the committee report, is that it's a private matter and not one related to the reserved matters before members. You may wish to add something to that, Simon. If that's...
Chairman, riparian rights are rights which landowners adjoining a watercourse have in relation to the watercourse. As I understand it in this case, it's groundwater which is being extracted. And so, in my view, it wouldn't give rise to any riparian rights at all. But it is not really, this is simply a matter for the approval of the reserve matters and whether they are appropriate in planning terms. Whatever rights objectors may have over the land is a matter between them and the landowners, and if they and it's a matter to be dealt with between them, and if it isn't resolved, it's necessary to go to court to resolve those issues as to whether adjoining landowners have certain rights. And it'd be fairly obvious from the comments that have been made already that the council isn't in a position, even if it was appropriate to do so, to adjudge on who has what rights over the land. This is simply a matter of approval of reserve matters and whether the details of the scheme are appropriate and the drainage provisions are satisfactory.
Okay, thank you. So we can't consider it at all at this. It's not a.
No, it's not material or appropriate to consider what private rights there may be over the land and the relationship to the development.
Okay, thank you. A couple more. Is that all right? Thank you. Okay. Sorry, there was such a lot to take in. You did flash up on the screen very temporarily of updates regarding the flooding. It's a massive issue, as we all know, on this particular application. Would it have not been better for us to have circulated it around to the members, even if it was, a couple of hours before the meeting, so we could have actually, had a bit more of a hold on what it, because there's so many aspects to this, to the drainage. And I don't know about other members, but, I've been reading through such a lot of detail, and it's a 30-page report that I've read through, and suddenly we get just a few, lines on a screen, which I don't know about anybody else, but I am struggling to read that. And I just wondered whether it would have been possible. I mean, what time did that come in for a start, if I may ask?
I think we have to consider we are where we are. If you want more detail to that now and want more time to consider what's on that screen, because I agree that there's a lot of important information, I'd urge that your question be more directed towards allowing Mr Jones to talk through that more rather than the potential or alleged failings that led to this point, because we have the information now. If members were ultimately minded that by receiving this information so late on it was counterproductive to making a decision, then that may inform your overall decision about this application. But I don't want to get into this kind of like, why didn't this come out then? But if you do want to ask the case officer to go through that detail now would be a good time to do that, I'd suggest.
Well, to be honest, yes, we do need the detail going through, but I just feel that, to go through so much detail in just, a short space of time, I don't know about any other members, but taking that in is going to be almost impossible. And also, how can we make informed questions, decisions on something that has only just appeared before our eyes? But that's just an observation.
And I sympathise. And like I said, if members feel collectively that this is such a substantial piece of information presented at a late stage and that you don't feel confident that you can make it a fully informed decision on this application because of the nature of how it's come in, i.e. late, then obviously you have options in front of you in terms of what you do with the application. I would remind members of that.
Of course, I totally understand that. All right, thank you. I'll leave the further question till a little bit later and I'll wait for other members to have a go. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few. Can I rattle them off? Okay. Green infrastructure had concerns. Have they been resolved? I'm not sure that I've read anything that says that those have actually been resolved. So can you give me an update on that as well, please?
Yes, sorry, I'll just try and find a quick copy of the committee report. Yeah, so as summarised within the committee report, there was an update response that confirmed that the previous issues had been resolved and the development was acceptable on ecological grounds. So that's within the consultees summary of the committee report.
Yeah, I understand it is, but there is no update from Green Infrastructure. There's no report to state. I can't read their words. It's not on the planning portal. So I appreciate that you've said a few words about it, but we're not actually understanding from Green Infrastructure how their concerns have been resolved.
So there are, I assume you're talking about green infrastructure as an ecologists rather than the green infrastructure manager. Yeah. So those comments within the report are verbatim. So there's a number of matters that can be dealt with through planning condition within the conditions list.
Thank you. I think it was the head of planning, I'm not sure if it was him or somebody else, was concerned about the plot switch, 12 and 14. Has that been resolved? Has that been done?
Is that in regards to the affordable housing comments? Yes.
We need to see that that's been done as well. Designing out crime also have had some issues. But I'm not seeing that their concerns have been addressed either.
I'll just quickly refresh myself with the comments. So in terms of their concerns, in terms of general layout and security, I've summarised within the officer assessment section that the development creates broadly a perimeter form of development with natural surveillance of most areas. There are points in terms of means of locking gates, etc. Very minor points, but in terms of the substantial issues, the scheme presents a very safe, well-surveilled layout of both public spaces and routes. So I'll just have a quick look at the conditions list. So there is a secured by design condition proposed to secure a statement that shows how they respond to the comments of the police officer in terms of the more minor matters in terms of gate locking and the form of what's proposed within the dwellings themselves. But as an overall environment, the layout is considered safe, naturally surveilled, well overlooked, and acceptable. So the very minor matters in terms of how a side gate is locked, there's a secured by design condition for the applicants to submit and gain approval of.
Okay, so yeah, the ecologist, I think we need to work out GOSI. The ecologist states that the proposal is now acceptable subject to conditions, but yet your report states that the conditions were met during the outline stage, which the ecologist would have been aware of. So I find that odd, because that was, we're talking about 2 years now. There is great concern with regard to the Greater Horseshoe Bat.
Sorry, Councillor Candy, I do need a question from this at some point.
Yeah, no, I'm asking questions, yeah. Sorry?
Please do give a question.
Yeah, so there were concerns from the ecologist on the Greater Horseshoe Bat and reptiles, but there are no conditions, as he stated in the report, or at least as far as I understand it. So what I need to understand is why those conditions are not being put in.
Yeah, so that's to save duplication on what's on the outline permission. So there's a number of conditions on the outline that have triggers and requirements to adhere to. The ecologist is obviously citing a number of proposed conditions, but when they duplicate conditions that are already attached to the permission, they're not considered necessary. So my recommendation as a planner is to obviously the list of conditions proposed. That doesn't mean that those conditions are missed or disagreed with. It just simply means that they're secured through the outline conditions. So you don't want, obviously, conditions need to be necessary, so you don't duplicate them. That's simply the case.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Members, any further questions? Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The attenuation tanks, obviously we're all aware of the use and why they're there and how effective they can be. But if, as has been pointed out, they back up later on, then obviously that water's got to go somewhere. Now, can you tell me what the provision for SUDS is on this land? Sustainable drainage, that is. Or is it all going into the attenuation tanks and then flooding out?
Yeah, so because of site constraints, it's according with the hierarchy in terms of sustainable soakways aren't suitable for the site. So it's a controlled discharge at greenfield rate in accordance with the additional capacity of, in terms of climate change. So obviously there's a series of storage tanks through the scheme as detailed on the drainage plans. I'm not sure.
Well, the idea of the sustainable drainage is that water will fall onto the land either and then gradually leach out. The legislation hasn't set up by the Water Authority, hasn't actually come through yet. So what implementations are we applying here on this site?
Yeah, so the scheme is designed to replicate the greenfield runoff rate. So it's exactly the same in terms of the controlled discharge as it would be if it was undeveloped. So that's the point of the scheme, is to replicate the natural situation. If you can't deliver it through SUDS, you deliver it through a controlled discharge that replicates the undeveloped site. So there is no additional speed of runoff from the site. There's no additional rainfall through the development. The same amount of rain falls on the site. And the design of the system is to replicate the slow release of an undeveloped site.
I think Ms. Ormsby wanted to come in on that as well.
It was just really to clarify. So when we're looking at SUDS, SUDS is a hierarchy. So it sets out the sort of the preferred approach, and then you work your way. If you can't meet the preferred one, you work your way down the hierarchy. So obviously the preferred approach is soakaways. And in this case, it's been demonstrated that soakaways are not achievable because of the ground conditions. So the next stage down in the SUDS hierarchy is on-site attenuation and attenuated discharge, which is the approach that's being used. The idea, and as Mr. Jones was saying, that you're then storing the water within the site, and it's only then released at a greenfield runoff rate, so you're not getting any surges. And of course, it is just managing the existing water that's on the site. It isn't additional water that's going into those attenuation tanks. It's the rainfall that would be landing on that site and either percolating into the land or running off the land, depending on the intensity of the rain and the ground conditions at the time. So so it is a SUD system. It's just that it's the second element on the hierarchy rather than the first.
Thank you, Chairman. Foul water and rainwater or groundwater. How's the foul water being attended to? Is it going into the attenuation tanks and then pumped into the main drainage? Because that is, we have a joint system in, or combined, I suppose, a combined system in Torquay. Is that going to be the case over on this development?
So the drainage plans show us a separate drainage system for the foul water. So there was there's a blue coded and I believe an orange coded layout through the site. So the foul is detailed separately. I believe it's shown that it's connected at a different point. So it will be separated from the surface water.
Thank you. Our own drainage people, the officer, Dave Stewart, is still not 100% confident, it seems, on that. Is that correct?
So as per the comments received today, principally before Christmas, the issues were in terms of a level of information on some of the private elements of the housing layout and how they fed into the proposed system. So the information that we've recently received that Dave Stewart has just commented on in terms of the slide before you is an additional, it doesn't change or alter the basic principles of the scheme, as in where the tanks are, how is it to be dealt with, what is the overall storage capacity. The additional information that was submitted is to do with the detailed layout of how the roofs, the pipe system that connects the roofs and the driveways to the system, the heights of the manholes, diameters of pipes, things like that. So very detailed and intricate, but they were an additional layer of information that didn't alter, where the tanks are, what the system is designed to accord with. And the response on the slide is obviously, the engineer. I'll just, sorry here. So the engineer is basically says there's some minor discrepancies within what's just been submitted, but the system, it would appear that the system has been designed in order that no properties on the development are at risk of the critical flood events. So I've already requested that the engineer confirms that that is no properties on the development or land or buildings adjacent, because that is what his review is there to establish. So I believe that that is a wording error, anomaly, because he is always very aware and his job is to check the overall risk of flooding to land and buildings adjacent. So I've asked for that confirmation, and obviously as confirmed in the recommendation, the expectation would be that the engineer does confirm that there is no risk to any properties or land or buildings adjacent. So he's principally saying there on point 10 that it appears that the surface water is appropriately designed, subject to confirming the minor points identified above, which are a list of manhole details and pipe lengths. So very minor things that not overall system design storage capacity requirements, it's detailed elements. Those details have already been submitted. They're with the drainage engineer. But principally, point 10 basically confirms that he thinks the system's appropriately designed, not to increase the risk of flooding. He'll confirm that when the 1 to 9, the minor detailed matters are submitted for his review. And I would always expect that that is established before we release any planning permission, just so all the drawings are correct, require no further submissions or amendments.
Yes, I think so. Thank you, Chairman. I'll think on that one. Could I have one other question? It's to do with parking. You have apartments. You showed a block with apartments. What's the parking position for that? Because you mentioned a car park elsewhere and parking on properties, but not for the apartments.
Yeah, so I believe I concluded within the committee report on that. From memory, there is one-to-one parking and there is visitor parking within that element of the scheme. I believe it was 2 visitor spaces, but I believe that's been reduced to 1 because I noticed that one of the apartments didn't have an allotted space. So that's been amended through a late plan, just to ensure that everyone has one-to-one parking, which is what is expected for apartments. So it's a relatively small apartment block, so one visitor space is considered acceptable in that context.
I have Councillor Mills, Councillor Kennedy, and then Councillor Barbara Lewis. Councillor Mills, please.
Thank you. There's 30% affordable and social housing, and I think from what the speaker was saying, the social housing and affordable is going to be 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedded. Is that right? Can you verify that?
Yes, I believe there was a slide that possibly discussed.
While you're looking at that, my question is, what allocated parking will it be for them? I thought I heard 1 space for the affordable and social housing. And I just want to check that if you've got a 4-bedded house with only 1 parking space.
Yeah. Right. So I touched on the central area of the site, which is just here, where 4 of the units are only identified as having 1 space. So I've suggested that we should have a revised proposal that delivers 2 assigned parking spaces for each unit, which accords with the development plan's expectation. So there are 2 visitor spaces within that forecourt, and there are 6 spaces here. So there are 8 spaces not assigned, marked as visitors. So I think there's potentially an easy solution to deliver 2 spaces per unit in accordance with the guidance in the local plan there. In terms of the other affordable units, all the dwellings have 2 spaces here, and as mentioned, the apartment blocks, they have 1 space in accordance with the expectation for flats and apartments.
So what you're actually saying is they won't be allocated, but there will be spaces should they not be used?
At the moment, they're not allocated. Oh, sorry. At the moment, they're not allocated. The recommendation is that they should be. And there will still be some visitor surplus there as well.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. The attenuation tank system, how is that going to be managed and by whom?
So the management is established through the outline permissions legal agreement. So there is the requirement to submit a open space and SUS management plan to the local authority. Basically, that's generally not uncommon for development, will be, say, the private management of those, say, key areas. But that's established through the Section 106 at the outline stage.
So are you saying then they're going to be managed by a private company?
Yes, that's quite common, and that's what I would expect.
So, well, my understanding, if it's going to be managed by, because at some point it needs to be handed over to South West Water. I think there's got to be. I mean, I'll go to legal on this one because I think there is something about them being handed over to South West Water. But my main concern is if anything happens to this management company and they fail for whatever reason, what position are the residents of this development going to be in, and us, Torquay Council, if it's not handed over to South West Water?
The usual process would be that there would be a residence management. It would be backed by a residence management company who would fund the continuing management of the SUDs.
So again, further to my question then, if that fails, because we have got a development in Torquay at the moment where the management system has failed, if that fails, what happens to this attenuation system?
Tone, I think that it would be for the residents to sort that out. It would be for the residence management company to sort that out. And I think that there is a requirement for the the residence management company to be able to do that through the funds from the residents, from the management company.
Councillor Barbara Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back onto the parking situation, on the report, it says on one part that all dwellings will have electric charging points, and then further on it says most dwellings will have electric charging points. So is it all or most? Firstly, please.
So the ambition is that all dwellings will be serviced by electric charging points. So the proposal at present is that most dwellings will be. I'll double check the list of conditions, but I believe the proposal is to get that extra so it accords with the development plan that all dwellings are.
Okay, thank you. It says there's uncertainty on access for all dwellings within the 3 pockets of terraced units. Now, the terraced units will only have courtyard parking or side street spaces. So will there be charging points for them, or?
So that would be the desire, and the condition is there to try and achieve that. So obviously it's easier on private drives and plots. In more communal facilities, how the technology is delivered in those sort of layouts, it would be for the applicant to show that they can deliver one-for-one. But the condition is notwithstanding the detail submitted. Yeah, shall be identified and submitted and approved to us. So, you know, it's the condition is there for the applicant to resolve how within a semi-communal sort of layout they deliver access for every dwelling as the development plan expects.
So it could be first come, first served, or free for all at those terraced?
I'm not sure, but obviously an appropriate detail would be that we can clearly see that every dwelling has appropriate access to a charging point, and that's what obviously the condition is there to achieve.
Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to Councillor Mills's question regarding the spare parking spaces. You said that they could be used as visitor spaces. Are they actually visitor spaces, or are they for the affordable houses?
At the moment, the light blue, I've just put the slide back on there. So there's 2 light blue spaces here, which are marked as visitors, and this run here is marked as visitors. What is detailed within the committee report is that 4 of these dwellings have only been assigned 1 visitor space, one parking space. Obviously, the development plan expects 2 spaces per dwelling. So the proposal before members in terms of the conditions schedule is to resolve a different proposal for the visitor spaces in order to deliver 2 spaces for all the dwellings within this pocket here. So it basically means privatising, assigning 4 of the 4 of the 8 spaces as a second space for the units that currently have 1, which would then give all dwellings within the scheme having 2 or more parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. So that's going to really amount to a bit of a bum fight, isn't it, really? You know, who gets to the parking space first, and, you know, they might be visitor allocated, but in reality, that's not going to happen, is it? It's going to be used because there's going to be a lack of parking spaces for those particular spaces.
Councillor Thomas, is there a question forthcoming, please?
Yeah, it wasn't a question.
Yeah, so the proposal is for them not to be all assigned for visitors. is to assign them to specific units. So it's not a bun fight. So all of those units have, all the spaces that are assigned are clearly assigned. So you'd have, rather than 8 visitor spaces, you'd have 4 spaces moved over to where there's a shortfall and assigned to specific units, and 4 spaces retained as visitor spaces with flexibility.
Okay, which kind of contradicts what you said to Councillor Judith Mills, but anyway, let's move on. May I ask another one, please? Thank you. I was listening to one of the speakers, gentleman called Graham White, and he was referring to moving the attenuation tank 10 metres north at the back of his property. Is that something that we can condition, and whether, this would be a better viable option to use in this case? Thank you.
Obviously, the proposal is before members to determine. Obviously, Kavanaugh's view is that, as they mentioned, there are no restrictions on the land within their ownership. So as per the slide here, we have sort of an open basin, which its principal role isn't to attenuate, it's more to filter the water before it goes in. So this here is like an open feature, like a depression, with a raised bank around it. And it's basically there to filter and clean up the water slightly before it goes into the tank system and out of the site. So this is 366 here, and he's possibly talking about this feature, which is between 6 to 9 metres off the boundary, and this tank here. So I'd say this is the proposal before members. I suppose if the drainage engineer gets to a point which he appears very close to, saying that the system is acceptable, or from a flood risk perspective, is that we have an appropriately designed system. There is a condition already attached on the outline to ensure that that system is delivered. So, if there is indeed no impediment to deliver it, the scheme is considered acceptable, it can be delivered. The scheme cannot progress if they cannot deliver that scheme. So obviously the proposal at the moment isn't to move that, or there being any substantial evidence to suggest it can't be delivered. But there is, I'll just highlight to members, there is a safeguard within the outlined consent that says the drainage system that is approved has to be delivered before they can occupy the site. So obviously the developer, if they're spending many millions of pounds developing the site, they need to know that they can deliver a drainage system that restricts any form of occupation.
Okay, thank you. And I've just got one more, sorry to be a pain. Looking, not this particular plan, but you put up another plan with the red line all the way around the outside as to... yeah, have you got that one on the screen, please?
One at the very end.
Yeah, go back. No, not that one. Yes, that one. Just for clarification, so the developer owns all that within the red line? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So at the moment, we've got planning permission for up to 100 dwellings. Yeah. What is worrying and concerning me, and is actually in the report, so it's obviously a highways problem as well, is that if one more house is built, then the highways have recommended that a provision for an emergency access 3.7 metres wide should be included. So what's worrying me is that if we don't put this in as a condition now, and then more dwellings come down the line for approval in a separate application, it's going to be too late to put in this emergency access down the line, because they might say it's not viable, it can't be done, we haven't got room for it. Whereas is it possible to have this condition popped in so as if one more house is built to take us over the 100, we have covered ourselves with the emergency access. It's in the report as highways have got an issue with it. Thank you.
So the outline consent for up to 100 didn't stipulate that they were required to deliver an emergency access. Obviously, the design guide states that you can deliver 100 dwellings off one access without one. So what's before members, as you sort of hinted yourself, is acceptable. Yes, there is it would be preferred from a highways point of view to have an emergency access point. And that's something that is within the recommendation to sort of explore whether that can be delivered to the south. At the moment, there is a point to the east, to Borough Park Road, which will be delivered to the edge of the site. It's here. There's not a direct connection to the highway here, so, but there is the potential that this in the future could get connected and act as a pedestrian and cycle route, but also a route for emergency access points. But in terms of what's before members, say 100 dwellings without that is considered acceptable, and the outline permission doesn't require the reserve matters to deliver one.
Yeah, obviously I do realise that because it does say up to 100 in the report. But what I'm trying to safeguard is that if it was one more property that came before us, then it would need an emergency access. And I just thought if we could try and put a condition in now, then it would, anything that came down the line, it would be already in place. There wouldn't be any problems, in the future that it wouldn't be viable.
So the access was obviously agreed outline, and I think that would include the requirement of an emergency access point. So I think it might be unreasonable to use that as a conditional, but there obviously is a desire, there is obviously benefits of safeguarding that, but in terms of also permeability as well. So there is a hope that the Borough Park Road connection can be made. Like I say, there is an unknown land ownership there, but they are going to deliver a cycle pedestrian route to the edge of the site there. Obviously, potentially you say it may be in their interest to future-proof it, and there is the opportunity within the resolution to continue conversations on that to potentially use this area. But the principal point, I think, is that access was agreed in detail at outline stage, and hence requiring them through condition is likely to be considered unreasonable, I'm afraid.
It's just that the highways had still had a really big issue with it, and and they've written that in the report. So for us to, to actually not take that into consideration.
Sorry, Councillor Thomas, this is one best reserved for debate rather than question.
I'm still trying to get it in as a condition.
Okay.
That's my issue.
And there'll be an opportunity to do that at debate stage as well.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Mills, please.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification. When we were talking about flooding and drainage, it was mentioned that, I think it was Mrs. Ormsby who mentioned that the runoff wouldn't be any different because the houses were there to what was there at the minute. Can she just explain that? Because obviously if you've got tarmac drives, tarmac roads, houses, the runoff will be different.
Yes, it will be different. What I meant was that the actual, the rainfall that actually lands on the site won't change. It is what it is. But yes, it does need to be managed because the way that rain runs off hard surfaces is different to how it might run off onto green fields. But depending on the nature of a green field, depending on the the soil type, sometimes it will percolate in, sometimes it actually does run off quite quickly. If you've got a clay soil, for example, the runoff can actually be quite quick off a green field. In other sites, it will percolate in really quickly. So if I gave the impression it's not different, I apologise. It is definitely different. But it's not it's not necessarily, you know, the rainfall is already there. It's just managing it to make sure that when it exits the site, so when it reaches and, you know, is managed and goes into the combined sewer, that it does so at a rate that is no greater than if it was still a green field. And that's the whole attention, you know, the design ethos effectively behind the attenuation system.
Thank you for that, but I beg to differ. Thank you.
Any further questions, members? Councillor Hill, please.
Sorry, Chairman. Could I just ask, combined sewage, and you mentioned combined sewage then, and I was under the impression earlier that there was two systems. And you just mentioned combined.
My understanding, and Mr. Jones can correct me if I'm wrong, is that within the site, there are two systems. The surface water is managed through the attenuation tanks. The foul sewage is managed through alternative drainage, but they both effectively end up linking into the combined sewer. So, which I'm assuming probably runs down through the road, so that's where they will end up. But on the site, they're managed as two separate systems.
Any further questions, members? Okay, in which case we'll move to debate. Members, any debate? I'll take Councillor Jackie Thomas first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I have grave concerns that, you know, we have, as I said earlier, read through a 30-page detailed report and based our questions on, you know, the evidence and the findings that were in front of us. This evening we arrive and on a screen, which I can't read, I have to say, because the writing was far too small, we are served with an update. I just feel that, you know, we need to go for a deferral on this. I feel that we need longer time to, you know, look into it. You could hear so many questions this evening on the flooding and the drainage. It's such a big issue. We've got to get this right. You know, there are so many problems in other developments. I won't mention names, but it is a big issue at the moment. We owe it to our residents. And I just feel we need to take a little bit longer. We need to digest, we need to analyse, and we need to be assured that the decisions that we make are the right ones. And I put it to the committee that, are you 100% happy with what we've been told this evening? And if not, I just feel we need to defer and, you know, for us to go away, read these reports with the detail that I read the 30-page report over the last 7-10 days, and that, you know, would just give us a little bit longer to digest it and to form our opinions and ask and analyse our questions. So I think I'd like to put deferment on the table at the moment due to more information regarding our flooding, our drainage. Thank you.
Okay, once we hit that stage, Councillor Jack Thomas, I will come back to you, and obviously, as you already alluded to, obviously, in the meantime, be thinking about your very clear and specific reasons for deferral once we're at that stage. But in the meantime, we're still in debate. I'll come to Councillor Kennedy, who indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got to say I agree with Councillor Thomas. I mean, our drainage officer, the words that are actually on there that I could read, says he is deeply concerned. Now, that isn't a light risk. There were the two words on there that I did read, deeply concerned. And this is a private management surface water drainage. Just very quickly looked at government paper. It's the Surface Water Management Action Plan published in 2018, when they talk about these specific issues with regard to private companies. we've already seen, you know, the private management company on other developments are just, they're not doing anything. So I think, I'm not sure that it complies, so I would want to be assured that it does comply. With regard to defer or conditioning drainage, I'm not happy with that either. I will say on White Rock, they actually didn't put any of the drainage in that they were supposed to, and nobody picked that up until 6 years after it started. So I think, you know, I want to see it actually in place, and this is an area which is prone to flooding, and it's not a 1 in 100 year. It is every time we have heavy rain. So we've got flooding at the moment, I expect. The parking is not policy compliant. Highways issues are yet to be resolved, so I think perhaps that gives us an opportunity to resolve those. And with regard to ecology, I appreciate that the officer has stated that the conditions are already in the outline planning. I didn't get that. I couldn't see what those conditions were. They weren't repeated anywhere so that I could understand it. And as much as I appreciate the last time, I haven't managed to read our legal advisor's email yet, but I appreciate the case law I quoted was for was for EIAs. However, the Aarhus Convention is for all environmental matters, the management and the mitigation, particularly on habitats and protected species. We're not seeing how the concerns of the ecologist are actually going to be dealt with. I appreciate it's in a different planning application, but it's not here for the public to understand. It's certainly not there for me to understand. So I think it's not just the drainage for me. I think we need to defer it for a number of things that need clarification before we can actually make an informed decision and a proper decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Before I bring in Councillor Long, Ms Ormsby indicated she wanted to come in.
Well, it was initially just coming back on the first point, and it was just for clarity, Councillor Kennedy, so reference to the comments from the drainage engineer saying he's deeply concerned. I know it's really small writing, so it is probably quite hard to read, but he doesn't say that. He basically concludes that at the very end that it would appear that the surface water drainage system has been designed in order that no properties on the development are at risk of flooding to the critical 1 in 100 year storm event plus 50%, etc. So that's his summary comment. He doesn't say in this comment at all anything about being concerned. I know, again, it is really small and hard to see, but the 9 points that are in that slide are talking, I think 3 of the points refer to questioning the height of manholes in 3 locations. And 3 of the points question, say that the pipe length shown on one plan isn't consistent with the pipe length of another plan, and he just wants to see everything tied together. Similarly, the manholes, on one plan it says the manhole cover is going to be one height, and another one it says it's going to be another. So those 9 points are matters of very specific small detail that he just wants all tied together so that there's a clear, comprehensive, enforceable scheme, so everybody knows exactly what's to be built and where. But they seem a lot, but they are actually very small elements, and he has concluded that he considers that the scheme is acceptable. Officers have noted, we've mentioned that he does refer to it's acceptable in terms of managing development with flood risk within the development. Now, his role as the lead local flood advisor is to have regard to flood risk throughout the entire area of Torquay. So as officers, we're confident that that's what he means, but the recommendation is subject to him confirming in writing that that's what he means before any decision is issued. And if he confirmed if he wasn't able to confirm that, it would have to come back to the committee if that was not the conclusion that he was reaching. So that was on the drainage. Very quickly, the scheme is policy compliant.
Sorry, I will allow Councillor Kennedy, because I
Yeah.
believe she was referring to a different page, but Councillor Kennedy, did you want to explain that?
There was a different slide up with information that we hadn't been given prior to the meeting, and in there was deeply concerned. But also, I think, just for extra clarification, he talks about the impact of on this site, but he doesn't talk about the impact of the housing lower. So I think we need to understand that as well.
Yeah.
But there was another slide up, so forgive me if I got the wrong slide.
So the slide before that was a late representation from the occupiers of number 366. So that's the adjacent talking about being deeply concerned. So there's a late, as an update, there was a late representation from the neighbour, and then the late comments where he talks about the manhole levels and the pipe lengths. Just in terms of the ecology quickly, obviously the ecology section did mention that the county ecologist has requested a number of conditions, but they are covered through the outline application. So there was obviously a paper trail there in terms of not disagreeing with his requests, but his requests are already secured through the outline consent. So you can't duplicate conditions. So as a planner, obviously that's why the conditions list is more streamlined rather than simply putting on conditions that he suggests.
What I'm asking for is that as lay people, we all understand how those conditions are put in then. We need that clarification. That wasn't clear. It wasn't clear in your report how the impacts on the greater horseshoe bat and reptiles were being mitigated. He just mentioned conditions, and there's no further information. I think we should be able to have that information in front of us so that we're satisfied it's been dealt with.
Ms Ormsby, did you want to continue coming back to Councillor Kennedy on some of those other points that she raised?
Just one last point, just for clarity, that subject to the adjustments that Mr Jones has suggested in his report, the scheme will be fully policy compliant in terms of car parking provision.
Councillor Long, please.
Thank you very much, and I fear I might incur the wrath of Councillor Kennedy, but I'm sure we'll make up afterwards. I have to say that, having listened to the debate, that I find it slightly ironic that the only person who has mentioned the housing crisis is the developer. And I'm not being rude to the developer. I'm sure I can't be the only person who's had casework this week, and probably every week, from people who are on our waiting list, who, if there is a deferral this evening, will have to wait even longer for the start of some more affordable homes to be built. So I'm not sure I could live with myself by waiting for a deferral. We have had quite a lot of detailed conversations about the drainage, and so much so that even I understand the drainage in this case. And I am given comfort by the drainage engineer saying that if he is not happy with the minor details that he's after, that he would bring it back to committee. So that's the get out clause that we have on that, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Mills, please. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. While we were talking about flooding, it was saying that adjacent properties would not be at all affected. Has there any thought been given to what might happen with Saxon Meadows across the road? It's not classed as adjacent, but I think it's already been mentioned that there are flooding issues in Saxon Meadows and behind Saxon Meadows, and I would like some work done to see what impact it would have on the other side of the road where that little estate is, because they're not classed as adjacent, are they?
I'll allow Mr Jones to answer that, but obviously I want to remind members we are in debate stage. But Mr Jones.
Yes, as my colleague mentioned earlier, obviously the the role of the drainage engineer is to ensure that there is no flood risk from developments for waterways. So that is land and buildings adjacent. That's not immediately adjacent. It's to ensure that the scheme is safe, appropriately deals with the same amount of rainfall but in a different way. And that's obviously the point that we seek to get to before any formal grant of permission is potentially granted. So as mentioned, you say that this is a contained way of wrapping up a slow discharge off the site, which is currently undeveloped. So I wouldn't expect there to be any risk of flooding if the drainage engineer is happy. And as I say, the engineer's comments are not immediately adjacent. It's generally, would the risk of flooding be increased? It's not specific on whether that's immediately adjacent or not.
I absolutely agree with Councillor Long. I'm very keen to get affordable and social housing built, but I think it's very important that we get it absolutely right, and the people who are going to be living in these houses are going to be happy for a very, very long time. So I agree with Councillor Jackie Thomas. I think deferring it till we get all the information absolutely right is the way forward.
Any further debate, members, before I go? Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Long said that the only person who mentioned a lack of housing is the developer. Well, we're all conscious of it. You know, I'm sure that goes without saying. But as Councillor Mills said, we want it to be right. And these people aren't going to go in there. They're not weekend dwellers. They're going to be living in there summer, autumn and winter, when there are going to be numerous problems as far as the weather is concerned. So once again, I'm going to support deferment when it comes to the vote, simply because there are too many little issues that are niggling points which have not been covered as far as I'm concerned. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I'll go back to Councillor Jackie Thomas if there's no further debate then. I would say, obviously, deferral as a general principle is something available to us, but obviously we are a decision-making body. So just a reminder, when we do use deferrals, which is we seldom do, obviously we need to be very clear in terms of what we will get by deferring it, i.e. what we'll get next time that we don't have available to us now. So for that bit of steer, I will go back to you, Jackie Thomas.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, of course, we all want to approve this application. None of us want to, refuse it. But we've got to, there are too many issues, I think, in this application. I don't feel that we should delegate to the officers at this stage, because there are just too many things to delegate. And as we found out with previous applications, by not discussing things more fully at this level and then it gets delegated, things can go wrong. I'm not saying will go wrong, but they can go wrong. And I just feel that we need to get it right for our residents, to live in substantial homes. So basically, as I say, there is more than just one thing I think that we need to defer this on. I think there was a question over the visitor spaces. Nobody knows exactly what was said tonight, and we don't really want that to be delegated because it will be a bum fight. The same thing went for the charging points. That again was not clear. The drainage situation, there was so much more to that this evening. That wasn't completely clear. I think we need more time, to look over these things. Ecology, that came up. We need more clarification on that. And highways, again, more clarification on the highways, because I brought up the subject of the emergency exit and entrance. I think that needs to be looked into further as well, especially as the highways engineer had, also still had concerns in the last report. I think there are so many areas that I feel we need to defer on. We all want a complete scheme, but we want one that's ready to go. We don't want one that, we're going to have to delegate lots of issues. So I don't know if I can be helped out a little bit by our team, but I think that's the situation I feel many of us are in this evening. Thank you.
I'll bring in Ms. Ormsby.
So it's really for members to decide which of those issues, or if any, they wish to defer on. I'll just give you my summary of what I believe the information officers have given you on these points, just to help you in your decision making. So in terms of parking, subject to the revisions that have proposed to allocate the parking for some of the areas where there are flats, the parking will be policy compliant, and officers are clear on that. There will be, as a consequence, a reduced number of visitor parking spaces. So in one area, there will be 4 visitor spaces instead of 8, but they will be allocated spaces for each dwelling which is policy compliant. And officers are quite clear that that is what will be delivered. In terms of highways, again, it is quite clear as to what is proposed. Access is an agreed matter. This is an outline application with access agreed, and it has been agreed to build up to 100 houses with a single point of access. That is what is proposed as part of this development. Highways have suggested they might like an emergency access, but with the 100 homes proposed, that it is that they are not objecting on that scheme. We have agreed the access details to this scheme. So again, that is quite clear as to what is proposed. Whether members feel that that's acceptable is the decision they have to make, but that's clear. That is the proposal. The ecology points, the officer is quite confident that they are covered in existing conditions. That could be, if members didn't feel satisfied with that, then it is possible that officers could signpost the relevant conditions within the outline to give members the confidence if they felt that that was a matter on which they wanted to defer. And the flooding element, is the main area that I think we've been discussing. There is recent new information. Officers' view is that the points that the drainage engineer is referring to are really relatively trivial matters, but because he is diligent, he's raised them all, he's looked at every detail, and those are the few details he still has got questions on, but he has confirmed that he's satisfied that overall it's a scheme that will work. But if members did feel that they wanted to defer on those grounds, then obviously it does give the opportunity for the drainage engineer for those matters to be completely addressed. And the matter of electric charging, again, there are a few queries on that. We could get more clarity, but without it, there's a planning condition that will more than adequately make sure that we have policy compliant electric charging within the site. So I think it's really for members to decide which, if any, of those matters you feel that you do wish more detail on before making a decision. But as I said, the matters in my particular view is in terms of parking, highways. I think those areas are quite clear already. The electric charging is covered by condition. The ecology is, but we could explain which conditions it's in. And I think that the principal issue where there has been late information coming forward is on flooding.
Before I bring in Councillor Candy, having listened to that, Councillor Thomas, are you, in terms of your proposal for deferral, are you wishing to modify your reasoning for deferral in light of what Ms Ormsby has just said?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, definitely the drainage is, I think, the major issue for us all. And I would like that deferred on that anyway, through you know, to give us chance to look in more detail. So you're saying categorically there is no chance of deferring it on those other matters then?
Members, it's really, that's a decision for members if they want to. My view is that I feel that on the matters of highways and parking, and subject to the condition that's proposed, my view is that we have clear information as to what is proposed on those matters. Whether members feel it's acceptable is obviously another matter, but I think that the information is available. I think the areas where, as I said, so I think it leaves flooding and officers being able to signpost members to where the ecology conditions are already referenced in the outline. So those two areas we could give more clarity on.
So, Councillor Thomas, if I may, and obviously you're well within your gift to say no, but I would suggest that you're listening to what's been said, your deferral reasons would be twofold, to allow more information and signposting in respect to ecology and flooding. Would that be acceptable to you?
Yeah, I think it is acceptable. I'm still concerned with highways as well, because highways were concerned. And that is an issue. I think if we didn't put the condition in for you know, the emergency exit, it could be too late down the line.
But I think that's not, with respect, I don't think that is a deferral. That's, as we heard, it's because it's numbers involved. It is policy compliant by numbers. It strays very close, but it's still policy compliant. So I don't think there's, by citing that as a reason for deferral, we're not going to get anything new when it comes back around again, unless the application changes or some other event happens. So we're not going to get anything new by asking for deferral, because it will just come back saying, okay, it's still within policy. I understand your concerns because it strays close to that numerical threshold, but because remember, when we defer something, we're saying we haven't got something we quite want now at this stage to make decisions, and therefore we need this. And so I think it's quite clear that you might be minded with ecology and flooding, because as Ms. Ormsby said, there's something more that we can learn that perhaps we don't know now, but I'd struggle to see where that would come from highways in terms of what new we would learn in the future.
Okay. I mean, I will be guided, of course, but, you know, I'd like it, you know, written in that it has come up as an issue, and that if one more house was added to the development, and let's face it, it happens a lot, it comes back with one or two more, then that emergency exit is going to be paramount.
Councillor, I'll take Councillor Manning, but I've got Councillor Kennedy first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think with regard to the highways, it's not just about what Councillor Thomas is saying. There is also some delegated highways matters that haven't actually been cleared up yet. So all we're saying is that those could actually be cleared up, so that it's decided by the time it comes back to committee, because it's tying up loose ends, but there's a number of things here that highways want to clarify on. But I also want to add to this, it's the management plan of the attenuation tanks I've got some issues with. I'm not sure if I need to know that it is what's being proposed does comply with the 2018 action plan written by government, because they've come up with, there are issues with regard to funding on these private companies. So I do have issues with that. I need to understand exactly what's going to be happen going forward, where the funding's coming from, how that is going to be funded, to make sure that we don't, that is a major flood zone that if it fails, if that management company fails for whatever reason, the system's going to be caught somehow.
Chair, I think we can provide further clarification on that. The agreement provides for the management company to be agreed, so they have to submit details to the council, and it's for the council to then approve them, and it's for them to submit details of the funding and how it's going to be funded. They may not know at the moment. The usual means, as I said, is usually through a residents' association. So we can, that is already provided in the agreement, we can look at that and look at the policy you referred to and provided further sort of clarification on that and any further conditions that might be appropriate. But having regard to the fact that this is a reserved matters approval and it was dealt with at the outline stage, but we can have another look at that.
Councillor Manning, please.
Is it my understanding that if we don't put anything in this time, when it comes back next time, we can't put it back in again? So if we left out, say, roadworks, highways, when it came back next time, we wouldn't be able to bring that up because it's had been passed already.
Not quite. I mean, I think...
that's what you told me once before.
So I think if you are minded to defer this evening on this item, and of course then it would come back, hopefully with equipped with the things that members have asked for in giving their reasons for deferral, I would like to see any future debate focus on those issues, but that wouldn't wouldn't bar you, I guess, from discussing or raising other issues as well. But I would steer the conversation towards those deferred items, to those issues that we deferred.
Before, I thought some that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. So we couldn't formally bar you.
So then I think we've got to put through as many things we think are wrong, put it through so we can get it put right. Now, I agree with highways. I think that should go there. I agree with what you were just saying about the you're saying you've got a group of people to get together, but in a big kind of place like you're building, so many houses, it can be hard to get a committee to do that. Smaller properties, like where I live, in an apartment place there, you've got a committee. But you're going to find a job to get a committee when you've got 400 houses or 300 houses being built, to be honest with you, and who's going to run it? So I think these things should be sorted out properly before we say yes to something.
Okay. So, members, we've been at this for nearly 2 hours. We had some really good questions, some great debate. But, Councillor Thomas, I really want to move to a point where we make a decision, whatever that decision may be. You tentatively have put forward deferral. Are you able to kind of, full clarity in terms of what you're happy to sign out to your reasons for deferral now, if I put you on the spot of it?
Yeah, reasons for deferral. Okay. Drainage, more information required. As I say, the information that was given to us just before we sat this, or just as we sat this evening, we need to look at further. The ecology, which was Mrs. Ormsby had said earlier, and I was going to go for highways, but you know, I still believe that it's something that is very close to our, you know.
I mean, whilst I, you know, again, without prejudging the outcome of what's on the table, obviously once that returns to, if it returns in the future, then of course you wouldn't be prohibitively barred from speaking to that item as well. So I need your full clarity there in terms of your reasons for deferral. Are your reasons, those two reasons cited, more information about ecology and drainage?
Yes, but as long as when it comes back, you know, highways is something we can still discuss, because if we couldn't discuss that, because we're down to the only two on the table, then that's going to cause myself and, from what I hear, this committee a problem.
Is Ormsby indicating?
So in terms of highways, Councillor Kennedy did point out that there are a few sort of, I suppose, snagging issues, as in highways there were a couple of matters that were subject to in the resolution. You know, I think it is reasonable that we could be coming back, if it is deferred, with the highway matters fully resolved. But just looking at those issues, as I say, the access arrangements for this scheme are agreed at outline stage. And whilst in terms of the drainage, we can obviously perhaps give a little bit more explanation about how management may work, that aspect has already been dealt with in the Section 106 agreement within the outline planning consent. That's already signed up to. We're not going to be able to change the clauses already within that 106, so we can perhaps give a little bit more explanation, but we're not going to be able to change that now.
Yep, so quite happy to go with the drainage, ecology, highways, as pointed out. Thank you. Is that okay?
Okay. Do you have a seconder then? I'm looking for a seconder for that one. So Councillor Kennedy, can you just confirm you're happy to second that? We're just going to go in circles, I fear, if we have any further debate on this, so I'm going to move straight to the vote. So all those in favour of deferral for the reasons stated by Councillor Kennedy. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 2. So the motion for deferral is carried. Thank you, members. We will take a break there because we've been at this for a while, and we will resume at 7:45. Thank you, members. Thank you, everybody. We'll resume the meeting now. So the next application to consider is that of 3 Keysfield Road, Paynton, reference P2021-0808. Again, the registered speakers have been confirmed as here, so ask Mr Jones to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an outline application with only landscaping reserved to deliver 14 apartments, which is 7 2-bed apartments and 7 3-bed apartments at 3 Keysfield Road. So it's seeking approval for the access, the layout, the scale and appearance. So this is a contextual view of the site. See the site here, and it sits within the Paynton and Roundham Conservation Area. And this is a closer view of the site. So this is Keysfield Road here. And this is the site in question with some 4 little red dots identifying the borders of the site. Just note some context in terms of scale of buildings adjacent and the relationship to the rear of the site here with communal parking. And this is just a view from the other side. So, like you say, this is the existing building. The site extends with a tree-lined border here and to the front of the site. To the rear, we have holiday apartments and flats and some parking areas. So this is a street view of the site and the building in question, which is in pretty poor repair and has some fire damage. And this is a view from the other side. Say it's a Victorian villa, and it's highlighted as a key building within the conservation character appraisal. So these are the existing elevations, A large two-storey flat roof rear extension there, and the internal layout of the existing building. So the proposal is to demolish the building and provide 14 apartments as stated. The footprint is largely similar to that previously established and consented through a conversion and extension scheme that members saw a couple of years ago. It retains a garden setting to the side of the building, and this one provides 16 parking spaces for 14 units, which is 1-to-1 and 2 visitor spaces. Also a designated cycle store and a designated waste store here within a similar area to the previously consented scheme. Mature trees are protected and retained along the front of the site and to the side of the site through tree protection plans. However, as mentioned, the landscaping is a reserved matter and would come in for future consideration by members. So this is the proposed elevations. So we principally have a rendered flat-roofed modern building. We've got a dominant central elevation, element to the building, which replaces the villa on a similar footprint and building line, which is 3 stories plus a recessed roof story. So the main elevations are finished in render, and the top roof element is in a grey standing seam. There are 2-story subservient wings run along to either side, and the distances to the side of the plot present no undue impact upon the amenity of neighbouring occupiers or significant trees. So this is a proposed side elevation showing the setback of the roof element and some of the detail of the bays, recessed sort of punctuated bays, detailed in a modern form here. And then a staggered rear elevation, similar to the consented scheme, with small terraced areas to the apartments and providing slightly greater separation distances to the rear. The impact upon the amenity to the rear is largely limited due to there being communal parking and communal gardens, and the buildings themselves being set at slightly oblique angles in terms of the distances and the level of interlooking. So future reserve matters has a potential for replacement landscaping to soften any impact to the rear as well along this boundary. And this is the other side elevation, similarly with a punctuated bay. There's some views in a minute which will probably show you clearer what the expected design outcomes are over this drawing itself. So this is the proposed first floor plan. It's similar sort of layout through the building. Let's say a mixture of 2- and 3-story apartments, which is welcomed in terms of providing some variety for small and medium households. And as you go up through the scheme, you say we lose the side elements above 2 stories, and again, and a single unit at the top, recessed from the edge of the building below. So we have some visuals submitted. So these are visuals of a slightly revised scheme which was submitted through the course of the application, following some concerns on the design outputs for the scheme, considering its heritage impacts, setting within the conservation area, and the loss of a key building, albeit one that's in quite poor repair. So in terms of design changes through the scheme, we had the 3rd floor of the right-hand wing removed to create subservience to the central element. So this reduced the scheme from 15 units down to 14, and provides some clearer delineation between the two. We also had a reduction in the parapet detail to remove top-heavy feel to the sort of third floor here. And we reimagined how the elevations were treated to either side in terms of a modern interpretation of a bay detail here. We also have some frameless glass to provide some clean lines and high quality materials to help enhance the appearance of the building. And we've had parking reduced slightly, which has helped retain a landscaped feel to the side of the plot and less parking towards the front of the plot as well. So moving through, this is a proposed model just from Keysfield Road of how the scheme will sit. Again, you see how the parking court sits to the front and side with the ancillary building for communal facilities here, parking, cycle parking and waste. And moving across along Keysfield Road. So there is a central access as shown on the previously suggested layout. And through to the other side where a bay detail has been introduced, similar to the other side elevation. And again, you've got the step down here, providing some subservience to the rear wing. So the key issues and material considerations have been summarised in detail within your committee report. See, I've just highlighted in bold a couple of the key issues there. In terms of design and visual impact, there's been some sort of quite extensive detailed conversations around the demolition of the existing villa, which is a key building, but one that's in very poor repair, and also the quality of the building that replaces it. The application is supported by a viability assessment, which suggests that the building itself is unlikely to come forward as a reimagined dwelling, or that the consented scheme that retained the villa but provided a wing behind it from a couple of years ago is no longer viable and is unlikely to come forward. So that's been assessed by an independent viability assessor who agrees with the conclusions of the submission that the consented scheme that keeps the villa will not come forward as it's unviable, and the proposal is viable and hence is likely to come forward. That, combined with the improvements on the design and elevational treatment, and also the layout through the course of the application, has secured a point where the removal of the villa is considered acceptable, obviously subject to ensuring that a scheme is delivered on the site through condition for the redevelopment prior to its removal. In terms of parking, movement and highway safety, the layout is broadly aligned with that was previously consented in terms of the level of parking, where it sits within the plot, and where the ancillary buildings for waste and cycle storage are also located. In terms of the level of parking, 2 visitor spaces are considered adequate, and obviously there are one-to-one assigned spaces which accords with the development plan's level of parking. As outlined in the officer report, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions outlined, along with the resolution of any new material considerations to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We now move to the registered speakers, so I'll call forward David Spalding and Penny Roberts, please. Yes, please both come forward. Thank you. So I understand you're both speaking for the application, and between you have a total of 5 minutes to address the committee. How you divide those 5 minutes up between you is up to you, but I'll remind you when there's 1 minute remaining of the total of 5. But otherwise, do take a seat and feel comfortable to make a start when you're ready to do so. yeah, just a case of, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Dave Spalding. I've lived on Keysfield Road for over 30 years, number 6. I'd like to show my approval for this development. I think it's a good opportunity to turn a brownfield site into something useful and not use a greenfield site. The building's clearly beyond economic renovation. I've talked to many of the neighbours, and every single one of them was in approval. Not one of them objected. I have 147 signatures, and these people live right in the same neighbourhood. They're not Torquay or Brixham or anything. What can I say? I think the planning committee should approve this as quickly as possible, get the building demolished and get 14 lovely flats built and improve our neighbourhood. I've been there, had to put up 20 years or more of the nonsense that's gone on at number 3 with the antisocial behaviour and drug dealing, prostitution. I could go on all night about that, but enough said. Okay, thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Penny Bobberts and I live at number 5 Keysfield Road. So I am the idiot that bought next door to the derelict site back in 2017. So I'm a relative newcomer to the area. I have to say, first and foremost, I think the proposals are fantastic. Aesthetically, so much better than what we have at the moment, but I think it will be a very desirable area that can only enhance not just Keysfield Road, but Roundham and the whole of Paynton as well. Who wouldn't want to live in a building that looked like that? I love Paynton. I really love living here as someone new to the area. And I think, you know, I have seen so many improvements over the last 5 years that I've been here down in the harbour, that this is just even more regeneration of that area. So I think, you know, it's long overdue. Let's approve these plans and let's crack on and get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much. Members, we have no further speakers, so we'll move to questions for the case officer, please. So members, any questions? Firstly, I'll take Councillor Long, please.
Thanks very much. Historic England cites some paragraphs from the NPPF. What weight should we consider those to be in terms of our discussions? And I was slightly disappointed with a paragraph about what the energy benefits might be to the proposals. Are we able to get any more detail about how much improved the sort of CO2 emissions would be, etc., with the new building?
So just on the latter point of the energy, I believe there is a planning condition to try and tease out some demonstrable and clear detail beyond what's been submitted. So I'll just double check that that's been proposed. Yes, so there's an energy low carbon condition proposed, condition 5 on the schedule before you, that seeks to details of proposed measures to deliver low carbon development and energy efficiency measures shall be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The measures shall seek to deliver, unless proven unpracticable, no less than 20% of subsequent in-use requirement delivered by on-site renewable energy sources. So that responds to the Paynton Labour Plan's ambitions for on-site renewables. So that you say that conditions is proposed in response to the sort of level of detail in the statements made within the submission. So we have some sort of clear understanding of what we can get delivered. In terms of English Heritage's comments, obviously The report tries to sort of express the journey in terms of the heritage conversation and the balancing of the judgment. So the building is a key building. I think English Heritage comments talked about a level of detail substantiating why it can't be come forward as the previous scheme. Obviously, as mentioned, there's been an independent assessment of the finances behind that consented scheme to extend at the back and keep the villa. So we have got to an established position where the building's unlikely to come back to life as a dwelling. The consented scheme is unlikely to be delivered because it's not viable, and hence in truth, the building is likely to decay further and not come forward with any sort of purposeful use. So, trying to balance the less than substantial harm in terms of we've tried to enhance the building's aesthetic quality to get a building that's appropriate, considering we're accepting that the building is unlikely to come back to life. So we've got to a point where the building's been enhanced through the scheme to get a better outcome, and it's a judgment in terms of the less than substantial harm of losing the villa that's in very poor repair with the public benefits in terms of housing delivery, efficient use of brownfield land, in a very sustainable location as well for occupants.
Yeah, Councillor Barbara Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The car parking. There's 14 car parking spaces, and is that plus the 2 disabled ones, making 16 in total?
Yes, 16 in total.
16 in total.
I'll just pop back.
And 2 visitor on top of that, making 18?
Sorry. There's 16 parking spaces in total for the 14 units. So there's 2 visitor spaces, one-for-one parking, and 2 visitor spaces.
Okay. Getting back to the charging points, my favourite. 20%, is that still the same?
I'll just have a look refresh my memory on the conditions that are proposed. Sorry, bear with me. Right, so there is a parking condition 15, which suggests that prior to first occupation, at least 3 charging points and the 2 demarked visitor spaces will be, details should be submitted and approved by the local planning authority. And that's obviously, that number of 3 is to accord with the development plan, which is slightly different to apartments to dwellings.
Just a query, really. There were 16 representations, all of which wanted the approval for this application, and only 1 that was objecting, which was Historic England. Is that normal to have 16 for it and only 1 against? Silly question, just...
Obviously, well, you get various different circumstances, but I would say generally the level of support does not exceed the level of objection to schemes, so it is quite rare that you'd probably get more or less unanimous public support for something.
Okay.
Councillor Mills, please.
Can you remind me of the 14 apartments? What size are they going to be? I mean, how many bedrooms? Are they all 1-bedded if there's 1 parking space?
So there's quite an even split of 2- and 3-bed apartments. I believe there's 7 2-bed and 7 3-bed. I think it was detailed in an early.
So while you're looking at that, so the allocation of parking spaces is okay for a 3-bedded, 1 parking space plus a 14th, a 7th of the other one.
Yeah, the development plan doesn't provide a sliding scale for parking in terms of bedroom numbers or size of apartments. It simply suggests that one parking space should be provided per apartment. So it does accord with the local plan policy in that regard.
Sorry, do you have another question, Councillor Mills? Or was that? No. Okay, Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. How have you referenced the heritage strategy?
So the report principally talks about the development plan and the national planning policy guidance, and also the statutory requirements in terms of the setting of listed the character and appearance of conservation areas.
But not to the newly made Torquay heritage strategy. I'll leave it there. One more question. Just so the planning balance, given the conservation area, how do you justify the loss of, I think it's one of 2 remaining villas of that type? If there is still 2, there might just be 1, not sure. Is there 2? 1? No, there's only 1 left. This is the last one standing, is it? Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Yes, so the MPPF provides guidance in terms of levels of harm and less than substantial harm of losing the villa. It's summarised within the report. I'll just try. Yeah. My report is my yeah. Basically, the considerations within this application has been to explore whether the building will come back to life or to continue to deteriorate, even though it's a non-designated heritage asset. So it's an identified building in the conservation area. So the heritage considerations are around the impact of the total loss of that non-designated heritage asset, and the impact of that on the wider designated heritage asset that is the conservation area. Obviously, there is some intrinsic value to the historic attributes of the villa that a modern building will not replicate, but the villa is in extremely poor repair, has fire damage, a number of cracks, etc. And hence, you can roundly conclude that the building is likely to deteriorate further, not come back into purposeful use, not deliver any form of housing, which is part of the consideration. So once you've looked at the likelihood of what's going to happen with the current building, and you're looking at the impact of the building that's going to replace it, is what are the qualities and characteristics of that development, and what impact would that have on the conservation area? There would be some harm losing a historic building, but the building that's going to replace it is through the course of the application has been enhanced and is to a level that is considered that it would be a high quality building that's in its place. In terms of the overriding balancing act, you've got to think that the building will not come forward in its current form. The proposed building is considered good design. It's a modern interpretation of the villa. It broadly replicates the villa concept with the wing in the concept of where we have previously consented the retention of villa, but with a 2-storey wing on one side and a 3-storey wing on the other side. So we've reduced the wing on one side in order to ensure that the central modern element sits as a contemporary villa with subservient wings, with a lesser amount of development coming off the rear.
Thank you.
Councillor Barbara Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know if there's any TPOs on the trees in the...
It's in a conservation area, so all the mature trees along the front and the side are protected.
They'll all be kept?
Yeah.
What about the hedging at the back? Will that have to come out, or will there be replacement hedging there?
So landscaping is a reserved matter, so that will come forward. So in the submission, obviously there is tree protection detail, so we ensure that the trees that are protected anyway are protected through the construction phase if consented. But then in the future, obviously a landscaping scheme, including green infrastructure to be retained and proposed new planting will come forward and will be considered by members of this committee.
Okay, thank you. Just like to say, Chairman, a bit early on in the session, but you know what I'm going to say. When it comes to it, I'd like to propose approval on this. Thank you very much.
Unless, of course, in the course of debate, your mind has changed, of course. Indeed. But yes, in that event, I'll come back to you, Councillor Lewis. If there's no further questions, members, we'll move to that debate stage. Okay, you all popped up at once there, but I think it was Councillor Manning, please.
I'd just like to propose second it. Okay.
Does anyone want to contribute towards debate before I move to proposal? Okay, right. I'll take Councillor Jackie Thomas and Councillor Barrow, please. Councillor Jackie. Okay. Councillor Barrow Lewis, your contribution to the debate, please.
Thank you. This property has been on an eyesore and a blot on the landscape for as long as I've been a councillor, which is nearly 8 years. I know of its history, as most of the residents of Keysfield Road have contacted me over those last 8 years with their concerns regarding antisocial behaviour, drug dealing, drug taking, alcohol-related issues, which resulted in a couple of fires needing fire brigade to attend. Also, numerous occasions where the police have had to attend. Taking all that into account, the residents, I think, of Keysfield Road have had enough and deserve to get rid of this blot once and for all. I therefore do propose approval on this application as per officer recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Along similar lines, really. This is another difficult application. I am not in favour of supporting the heritage argument, as the villa is in very poor condition. And from reading the representations, residents have certainly had enough of this eyesore. For me, I feel I need to add great weight to the fact that this property could potentially lay empty and undeveloped for many more years to come. Although I do have some reservations, on balance, of course, I will support this application. Thank you.
Anyone have any new points to raise at debate stage? Councillor Candy, please.
Yeah, thank you. I've got to say I really do like the plans. I just don't like where they are. I think it looks fabulous, etc. But, you know, we've got a new heritage strategy, which in this area talks about the roofs, and which this one doesn't have a roof. Well, it's got a flat roof. It doesn't fit with the strategy. It is the last remaining building. I appreciate what you're saying. It's been left to rack and ruin. It's become an area for, you know, all this negative behaviour, etc., etc. However, that has been in our gift to do something about that. You know, as a council for, you know, number of years, obviously. And there is a planning application that has been approved using the same building and 10 apartments. So I've got to say, from a conservation, we don't have much left in Torquay. I would fight tooth and nail on that if it was in my area, but I will. You are the ward councillor, and I think it's a shame, because it is the last one standing, and it's got an awful lot of architectural interest. If it was, I couldn't see the building particularly well, so it's really difficult to tell how badly it is. But I think, from my point of view, I'm going to abstain on this purely because of the conservation side. But thank you, Chair.
There's no further new points to raise. I will go back to Councillor Barbara Lewis. Just can you confirm that you're still happy to propose as per officer's report?
I'm happy to propose approval as per officer recommendation.
I believe there's a hand. Was it Councillor Councillor Manning? Are you still happy to second that?
Yep, quite happy. Yep.
Okay, I don't think there's any need for any further debate or comment, so we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal for approval? So, and against? And abstaining. So that proposal is carried. The application is approved. Members, we move to the final application of this evening, which is El Patio 11 Alta Vista Road, Paynton, reference P2022-1090. And there'll just be an officer changeover. Oh, my apologies. Okay, so members of the public who don't want to hang around for this item are, of course, welcome to leave. If you want to stay, that's great too, but, you know, you say. So. Thank you.
Right, so this is a Reserve Matters application to agree just the hard and soft landscaping details in relation to an outline consent that was granted in 2019 for the demolition of the existing property here and the replacement with an apartment block containing 10 units. So, sorry, this is the site here. This is the block that's going to be demolished and redeveloped. And in addition to agreeing the landscaping details, there's also a condition that says that at Reserve Matters stage, they need to provide details of enhanced biodiversity at the site. So this shows an aerial image of the application site, comprises a two-storey detached residential dwelling, an outbuilding and detached garage, and 9 off-street parking spaces, as well as a swimming pool to the rear of the site. There's currently a pedestrian access from both Alta Vista Road and Roundham Gardens, and vehicular access from Roundham Gardens. The site's outside of, but adjacent to, Roundham and Paynton Harbour Conservation Area, which is the boundary of which is to the west. So this shows the existing layout at the site. And this is the proposed landscaping plan, which includes some wider finishes to the proposed building. So you can see the landscaping details as set. So this is the proposed new building in the central area here. You can see we've got some car parking areas which were previously approved in terms of their location. And what we're agreeing at this point is just the finishes of the hard surfacing area and the details of the landscaping and planting within the garden and tree area. So the proposals include retaining the hedgerows on all sides of the site, retention of the existing lawns to the south of the proposed units, the formation of the 10 parking spaces using blockwork surface, a gravel access road and turning head for the parking area, retention of existing tarmac access route to the south, new tree planting and retaining existing cherry trees, and the provision of bird and bat boxes in terms of biodiversity gain. So these are the proposed elevations that are just showing here the location siting of bat and bird boxes in relation to the discharge of condition. And this is now just showing the site in context. So this is the site here. It's Alta Vista Road looking south, with existing hedgerow and trees which are going to be retained, I think probably managed a little bit more so than they currently are. Another view of the hedgerow and into the site looking east where the vehicle access will be created. That will be the only loss of hedgerow where the opening is increased. And this is the hedgerow, an existing house that's to be demolished, but the hedgerow retained. And this is the existing site entrance, the existing range of outbuildings and the tarmac driveway, and views from the south at the edge of Roundham Gardens. Key policies are neighbourhood plan policies, which are design principles and residential development. The key issues are the landscaping trees that are proposed, trees to be retained, and ecology and biodiversity, where it's considered that the details of the provisions are satisfactory for the scale and nature of development proposed, and that the landscaping proposed will be in keeping and in character with the area generally. And as such, it is proposed that the reserved matters are approved as set out in the officer report, and that the final drafting of conditions and addressing any further material considerations that may come to light be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ormsby. We don't have any registered speakers on this item, so we'll move straight to any questions for the officer. Councillor Kennedy, please.
I don't know, but it looked to me like it was a replaced section, in which case it would be permitted development.
I'm going to move to debate then, if there's no further questions. Any debate? Okay, then let's seek a proposal, please. Proposal, please. I think I saw Councillor Barbara Lewis's hand first, so I'll go to her.
Happy to propose approval on this as per officer recommendation.
Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think there's need for debate. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. That is carried. The application is approved. That's the last item this evening, so I hereby close the meeting. Thank you.